Welcome back to our continuing coverage of UFC 225. Ariel, Helwani here, standing alongside our own Marc Raimondi in front of the United Center. In fact, specifically in front of Chicago Blackhawks greats Bobby Hull and Stan Mikita. This is one of the most famous arenas in the United States, and it is hosting tomorrow night's stacked UFC 225 pay-per-view. Now, there is a twist, my friends, and this is something that we have come to expect from these big UFC cards. Let us get into that right away. The news is that earlier this morning, Marc, Yoel Romero, the challenger in tomorrow night's main event against champion Robert Whittaker, initially weighed in at 186 pounds. He was then given 2 hours by the Illinois State Athletic Commission to shed that final pound, and he ended up coming in at 185.2, meaning that if the fight continued, it would then become a non-title fight. But both Romero and his team are saying that the Illinois Commission cut short his weight cut, and they only gave him an hour as opposed to the full 2 hours. They're very upset about this, but as of right now, we are being told that the fight is on. It will continue as a non-title fight tomorrow night here in Chicago. So, a lot to digest here, especially when you consider the fact that just a few months ago in Perth, Western Australia, Yoel Romero was scheduled to fight Luke Rockhold for the interim middleweight title. He missed weight, ended up winning that fight. Interim title vanished, but he still got a title fight. Here we are again, back-to-back, another incident. What do you make of all of this?
Well, I mean, it's another situation where we're talking more about weight cutting, the early weigh-ins, and we're talking about actual fighting, and it's happened so many times over the last few months, few years. It's just a constant storyline. What are we going to do about weight cutting? And no one has the answer. And this is just another example of a big fight, a title fight, a main event fight being up in the air until hours before the fight now because of weight cutting. Sure. It's just another in a long string of these situations.
I mean, we just came out of the arena where they held these ceremonial weigh-ins, and we didn't know how this was going to be addressed. It almost felt fitting this week of all weeks, where the topic of moving the weigh-ins back to the afternoon, it felt like the old days where we didn't know, if someone was going to make weight and what was going to happen. It was all kind of unfolding in front of our eyes. We saw Romero here just a few hours later. He seemed down. It kind of feels like Whittaker is a little more amped up, maybe a little annoyed, but from what I'm told, his team said that he never negotiated for more money. He never asked for a weight cap like what happened with Darren Till and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He came all this way. He wants to fight. But it does sort of feel like, the air has been taken out of this fight, right? The stakes are different.
Well, yeah, it's not a title fight anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, of course the stakes are different. I mean, Whittaker can't defend the belt because the belt is no longer on the line. So here we have a champion in a non-title fight, which hasn't happened since, Anderson Silva against Travis Lutter. It's a really weird situation. So what happens if Yoel Romero wins the fight tomorrow night? He's not the champion. Whittaker's still the champion, but he's coming off a loss. It's a bizarre situation. It's unfortunate. And also, want to add, Yoel Romero, okay, the fight's going to happen. That's all well and good. I'm glad that they're going to fight. I want to see this fight. It's a great fight. But we were like a few feet away from Yoel Romero just a few hours ago when he had to be helped by two members of his team. He was groaning and grimacing with every single step he was taking. He was hunched over. He looked horrible a few hours ago, and now he's going to go fight in about 24 hours from now. So I'm not a fan of anything about this. Again, it's a great fight. I hate to lose fights because this is why we're here. This is what we do, right? I mean, this is what fans want to see. They want to see the fight. But this weight cutting stuff, again, I mean, I know I'm a broken record, but when is this going to end?
It does feel a little uncomfortable that the man has just, overexerted himself to the point of dehydration. He's wincing in pain, and now he has to go in a cage and fight another human being. Only in this sport, and maybe boxing to a degree, but it doesn't feel as prevalent. Does this sort of thing happen? And so this is kind of the point where I ask you for a prediction. I ask you how this fight is playing out. Do you think any of this plays into what happens tomorrow night? Because let's not forget, even his manager, Abe Cowa, told me earlier today that he was scared for him in Australia. He was nowhere near as afraid for his health and safety this time around. They're adamant that they could have made the weight had the commission not stopped it. But yet we saw what happened in Australia when they were scared for him, and he knocked out Luke Rockhold. So do you think any of this plays into how the fight plays out tomorrow night?
It's hard to say because Romero is a different breed of athlete, and maybe he recovers and he's fine. And he did against Luke Rockhold, and that was an afternoon weigh-in. That wasn't even the early weigh-in, so he had less time to rehydrate and recover after that. So in the spirit of weirdness and chaos. We'll get to chaos in a second. That's the co-main event. But in the spirit of just weird things happening, I'm gonna pick Yoel Romero to win tomorrow.
Wow. Jeez. Are you surprised that Whitaker isn't, angling for more, isn't negotiating, isn't asking for a cap, is honestly being the perfect soldier here?
A little bit. I think there's leverage, but he did fly an awful long way to do this fight. I think that he's kind of butted heads with the UFC leading up to this a little bit. I know there have been some issues about when he was going to defend. The thing with wrestling in the Commonwealth Games, they kind of had like a little bit of a I mean, it was not even a falling out, but there was some butting of the heads, and maybe he just wants to say, you know what, I'll do you a solid this time. Maybe you'll do me a solid the next time.
You think Romero can finish him? First time they fought, of course, almost a year ago, 11 months ago to be exact. It started off very well for Yoel Romero. He won, in most people's view, the first 2 rounds, and then he ended up losing the last 3. Whitaker ended up winning the interim middleweight title. Do you think he could finish him, or do you see this fight going the distance?
I think he can finish him. I don't see why not. I mean, Romero can finish like a rhinoceros. I don't. Yeah, he could finish him. I don't think he will. I think it'll be a decision. But yeah, certainly he could.
By the way, if Romero wins, and of course is in a title fight, do you book the immediate rematch? Do you go with the trilogy?
I guess you have to, right? If Romero wins, there's no other way to do it. But then you have to hold your breath to see if he makes weight again.
Right.
It's just a situation that they shouldn't have been in because he missed weight against Rockhold. They probably should have said, all right, let's see if we can come up with a better opponent for Whitaker, a better contender. I know that Romero probably deserves it, but he couldn't make weight in Australia. Yes, it was a bit of a short notice fight. It was a long flight out there for him, but they were gambling. They were rolling the dice on this fight happening, and now it's not a title fight. So they came up snake eyes, I guess.
Yeah, one of the narratives going into this one has been this is going to bring normalcy back to 185. And it feels like there hasn't been a normal middleweight title fight since maybe when Luke Rockhold fought Chris Weidman at 194, because since then they were going to have the rematch between those two. Weidman gets injured, Bisping steps in, of course wins the belt, shocks the world. Then we have the bizarre Bisping versus Hendo fight, right?
Yeah.
Then we have the the long layoff. Then we have the interim title fight, and we think that Whitaker is going to fight Bisping. That doesn't happen. Bisping ends up fighting GSP, who emerges. Then we're supposed to have Whitaker fight Luke Rockhold. He gets injured. Then we have Rockhold versus Romero. Romero wins the fight but misses weight, and now we have this situation. It's like this division is cursed or something like that. It just doesn't. It almost seems fitting that Romero is going to win tomorrow, and now you're going to have a champion coming off a loss to the guy who just missed weight. So I kind of feel what you're. As The Rock once said, I smell what you're cooking.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's all I got.
Kelvin Gastelum was here. Maybe he could. He was in a suit. Maybe he can suit up into a nice Reebok kit and get in the cage tomorrow if Romero can't go.
All right, so that's where things stand right now. Let's talk about the co-main event, and it features Colby Covington going up against Rafael dos Anjos for the interim welterweight title. Speaking of strange situations, still can't quite understand why this is an interim title fight, but the fans don't seem to mind because right here at these ceremonial weigh-ins, I would argue that Covington and our RDA got the biggest reactions. Covington got a lot of boos. RDA got a lot of cheers. This has been a great thing for RDA and his public persona, the way people have received him. The first time, really, at least in my view, that people truly care about him, and especially in a positive way. They've appreciated him, but not like this. This is kind of fun. I'm kind of enjoying it, right?
Yeah, I know people at home are probably gonna poo-poo this because Covington has that, as you like to say, the X-Pac heat.
I disagree.
I'm not saying I agree, but I think that there is a feeling among people.
I don't buy that. I think they all will watch.
I think so too, and based upon again the reactions here, like you said, RDA got a huge pop at open workouts on Wednesday. Got another huge pop again today. He wasn't getting those when he was the lightweight champion in the UFC. He's getting them because Colby Covington is so hateable by the fans intentionally. It's obvious what he's doing. It's what he's trying to do, and he did it again today at the ceremonial weigh-ins and referenced Donald Trump again and saying he wants to bring the interim title to the White House, which I think is kind of fitting. Yeah. But what he's doing is certainly working. Yes.
What do you make of this whole story that he has concocted about going to visit Donald Trump in light of what's happened with the Philadelphia Eagles?
look, he's being true to his gimmick. I mean, I give him credit. I don't know if Dan Lambert's in his year, because Dan Lambert is one of the best promos in pro wrestling over the last few years with his work in Impact. But yeah, it fits what he's doing. It's getting heel heat in Chicago, which is obviously a very blue city. So yeah, I mean, I think again, I know there's a lot of. I tweeted something that got people a little bit angry yesterday.
What was that?
We were at Media Day, and there was that great statue of Michael Jordan at the United Center indoors now. And I walked in, and the first thing that I saw was that there was the Jordan statue, and there was the fight poster right above it on the video screen, and I could only see like Jordan and Colby Covington. So I took a picture, and I said, I managed to snag a picture with the GOAT and Michael Jordan, and people didn't really like that tweet all that much, but I think that speaks to what Colby's doing. Whatever it is, in this age where there's a lot of generic stuff in MMA, there's a lot of MMA, there's not a lot separating some people. He has managed to separate himself, and I guess kudos to him for that.
How do you feel about the belt?
The interim title? Oh, I mean, if Tyron Woodley wants to come back in July or August, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I mean, but this is where we're at now, apparently, in this era of the UFC, where interim titles just kind of magically come out of nowhere, and here we are. So I'm not gonna make that bit much. I mean, we're far gone from that topic now, so I can't really be too upset, I guess.
Who do you favor in this one?
Dos Anjos, probably. I mean, Colby Covington is still a guy that is a bit of an unknown quantity against the top tier, top level fighters. Dos Anjos, we know what he is. He was the lightweight champion. He's had a great run at welterweight. He's coming off the win over Robbie Lawler. He has one of the highest win totals in the history of the UFC. He's kind of snuck up as one of the great fighters, and now in two weight divisions, kind of quietly almost with what he's been able to do. His resume, it's been excellent. So we kind of know where he's at. He's great. If Covington can win, that's a huge win. It's an interim title, but I think to me it's what's bigger is that he beat someone of Dos Anjos' stature.
Yeah, and you almost have to then think that Woodley's hand is forced and he has to fight Covington, something that he hasn't been too keen on doing because he said he didn't beat anyone of any great stature. RDA certainly has the resume. Let's talk about Holly Holm versus Megan Anderson. Yeah. And this is a fight that hasn't been labeled as a number one contender fight because really we don't know where Amanda Nunes fits into the Chris Cyborg picture, but it is notable because it's the first non-title women's featherweight fight in UFC history. And to me, what was most notable this afternoon was when they were squaring off, there's a noticeable size difference between Megan Anderson, a true 145er, and Holly Holm, a true 135er.
Like if we were
something like that. It is reminiscent. Similar. Yes. What did you make of that, and how big of a factor do you think that is going into this fight?
It could be a very big factor. Holly Holm, I think, said that she's only faced one person in boxing that was similar in size to Megan Anderson. I think she ended up winning that fight, but MMA is a different game, and Megan Anderson has a different skill set. I'm curious to see where Megan Anderson has come in the last year plus since we've seen her fight. That'll be very telling because she still is a very inexperienced fighter. We know what we're getting with Holly Holm. Holly Holm is the former champion in it's almost like the RDA fight with Covington. We have a former champion in a lower weight class coming up and facing Megan Anderson is much more unknown than Covington as far as the quantity, but there is that thing there. But the fight to me is a bit weird because Holly Holm keeps sounding like she wants to go back to 135 and fight Nunes, but Nunes might fight Cyborg. So where does that leave the winner of this fight? What direction does that put them? It's kind of a weird. I think it'll be a good fight, but the actual matchup, I don't know what the future is for the winner.
Yeah, I'm choosing to ignore the stakes because it is so confusing. Yeah. I'm curious about the matchup because when this fight was first announced, it was a hot topic in the sense that people were wondering, well, why would you, potentially kill off Megan Anderson, who hasn't fought in a year and a half, who hasn't fought anywhere at the level of a Holly Holm, despite the fact that maybe she's, not winning as much as she used to. I sort of feel like, look, if Megan wins, there's the big fight, there's the big win. And if Holly Holm wins, she's right back in there, and she's still a draw, I do believe. Her fight against Chris Cyborg did way better than Cyborg's fight against Yana Kunitskaya. How do you feel about the matchup? Putting yourself back to 2 months ago when it was announced, do you think it's smart, or do you think it's ultimately a mistake to book these two against each other?
I guess it's just like anything else. It depends on how it ends up. If Anderson does win, then we have a new star on our hands, right? If Holly Holm wins, she just lost to Cyborg in December, so It'll really, like many things in the sport, it depends on the outcome of the fight.
Okay. Let me ask you about. And by the way, did you give us a prediction?
I did not.
I almost let you off there.
Holly Holm by decision.
Okay.
Again, known quantity, and I don't even know if you asked me about Dos Santos.
Well, you said you were leaning towards, right? You want to go official?
I'm not just leaning. I'm
Okay.
RDA by decision.
All right. Let me ask you now about Tai Tuivasa and Andrei Arlovsky. Tuivasa has been.
Shui?
Yes. Have you ever done a shui?
Lord, no.
Would you ever consider doing a shui?
I mean, never say never.
Oh wow.
Right?
Spit or no spit? Virgin or no virgin?
This is going into some really strange territory here, Ariel.
Would you ever consider doing a water shui? He said it was sacrilegious, but would you do that?
No, I think I would need to be drunk to do a shui, right?
But a water shui?
So you're saying I'd have to be drunk and then do a water shui? What's the point? If I'm already drunk, why not have a beer in there?
If you don't like beer or if you're not drunk?
Let's move on.
All right. You're the one who brought it up, by the way. Tai Tuivasa has looked good.
You were going to bring it up.
1,000%. He is undefeated. He's fighting in the United States for the first time, and he's fighting a legend in Andrei Arlovsky.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because in many ways this fight reminds me of a fight that's on the prelims, which is Alistair Overeem versus Curtis Blades. Young gun going up against a legend. And so maybe we group the two fights together. What do you think? Do you like this matchmaking from Mick Maynard? Try to build some new stars at heavyweight.
I like it a lot. I think this is perfect. I think both those fights are. When I saw them both, I was like, this is really great matchmaking because Tuivasa gets a win over Arlovsky. It's a big name. It's that big scalp that sends him to the next level. Everyone knows Arlovsky's a former UFC champion, and Arlovsky wins. You know, he's a popular guy who's right back in the mix, so to speak.
Looked good as of late since moving to ATT.
Absolutely, and the exact same thing goes for Overeem against Curtis Blades. I think Curtis Blades looked so good against Hunt. He beats Overeem. We're talking about a possible title shot for him in the not too distant future. So I think McMaynard. I think McMaynard has done great in general, but that's some good matchmaking.
It does feel though that there's a little more momentum behind Tuivasa, right? Especially after the win in Perth. Blades is. His fight wasn't. It was a big win over Marc Hunt, more impressive than beating Cyril Asker, but wasn't the most fan-friendly fight, right?
Well, I mean, Tuivasa also just his charisma and his outside the cage personality. We're talking about a shui. I don't think Curtis Blades is going to do a shui after he beats Overeem if he beats Overeem.
Are you picking both youngsters in those fights?
It's tough. It's tough. I'm going to pick Tuivasa, but you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna pick both. I think it's going to be a passing of the torch kind of night in Chicago.
Changing of the guard.
I think so.
Reminds me of when Pete Myers replaced Michael Jordan when he went to go play baseball.
Sure.
Yes.
I think, for the heavyweight division, I think it's a blessing. There really needs to be some kind of turnover, some new faces, some new blood. I think it'll be good for the division if both of those guys win.
And now here's the big one. What a week it has been for Phil Brooks, a.k.a. CM Punk.
Right.
On Tuesday in a courthouse not too far from here, he was vindicated. He beat his former employer, WWE, not just him, but his friend Colt Cabana, in the defamation lawsuit against them by a WWE doctor. Personally, I think it's a victory for podcasts and for media as well, because this could have opened things up to future lawsuits in terms of what's being said in interviews and the interviewer. This is I was kind of freaking out about it, if I'm being honest. But anyway, a big victory for Punk and his friend, and then he moves from that on Tuesday to singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" Tuesday night to checking in, and here he is getting a second shot in the UFC against Mike Jackson. What do you make of the buzz leading up to this fight here in Chicago? It makes all the sense in the world to book him here. He is a very proud Chicago son. He loves Chicago. He has been synonymous with this city in terms of the wrestling scene here. And how do you feel about the fight? It is a polarizing topic, right? A lot of people think he shouldn't get another chance. A lot of people think he shouldn't be on the pay-per-view. What are your thoughts on this fight?
Here's the weird thing with CM Punk in Chicago, because if this were a wrestling event, the place would go bananas when he comes out, right? But it's an MMA event. It's an MMA fight, and MMA fans, especially the purists, are not huge enthusiasts of pro wrestling, A, and B, someone from that world getting a shot, especially on a main card in kind of a big fight that could have gone to someone else. So here we have CM Punk in his hometown, but MMA fans who go to these events are not psyched about his fight. So I'm very curious to see how the reception is. Today at the ceremonial weigh-ins, he was just another guy. He really didn't get a big reaction. And I think he knows this too. He said it to you the other day. So I'm very curious about that. The fight itself, who knows? Who knows? I mean, we don't know how much he's improved, if he's improved since 2 years ago. He's had injury issues, but his coaches, his teammates have said that he's worked his butt off and he's starting to get it more. But again, he's 39 years old. He's injury prone. He's had 20 years of wrestling that's kind of beaten down his body. And then you have Mike Jackson, who is also 0-1 in MMA. He has a little bit more combat sports experience, kickboxing and boxing, but in MMA, we don't know. It's a giant. I mean, you can't pick that matchup. No one can pick that matchup because we don't know enough. I asked Ricardo Lamas, hey, so what do you think about that fight? He's like, if you showed me Mike Jackson, I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. And that's kind of how this fight is. We have no idea.
And there's been no footage on Punk. The first time he fought, there was the 4-part documentary series. Here, I feel like, and it's kind of been done by design. Like, he's been kept a mystery, which adds to the intrigue. Only in MMA, though, with the fact that this fight that most of the hardcore fans are not happy with, the fact that it's on pay-per-view where you're being charged, the fans are upset about this for some reason, because for some reason they feel like it should be lower on the card where more people are going to see it. And here it's being tucked away where, the debut didn't do that well on pay-per-view. So what are you so mad about? That they're charging you for this, but that the fight that you would rather see is actually being offered to you free? It almost feels like a win-win. If you really want to see the fight, buy the pay-per-view, and you're getting, I don't understand this idea that he's taking someone's spot.
I agree.
Overeem and Blades, Claudio Gadelha and Carlos Esparza, they're going to be seen by at least 3 times more people if this thing trends the way we think it's going to trend. What's the big deal? I don't understand it. It's the strangest argument.
At Media Day, I asked almost everyone that I spoke to about CM Punk. Are they okay with him being on the main card ahead of many of them? And not a single fighter said, no, I feel like I should be up there instead of CM Punk. Not one. So the fans are actually more upset about this than the actual fighters are, including Carlos Esparza, including Claudio Gadelha. I asked them all, and they were like, no, we get it. It's business.
Win or lose, do you think he gets another chance? Do you think he fights again?
If he wins, I would say yes, he fights in the UFC. I think he will fight again no matter what. It just may not be in the UFC. If he loses, it probably won't be in the UFC because all respect to Mike Jackson, who I like quite a bit, who I know as a fellow media member, who can if the CM Punk can't beat 0-1 Mike Jackson in the UFC, who can he beat in the UFC?
The booking makes all the sense in the world. They both lost to Mickey Gall, who, for the record, is picking CM Punk. Doesn't really have a scientific reason, but he's going with Punk because he lasted longer with Gall in their fight. It's so hard to pick this fight, but I'll ask you anyways. Who are you picking?
I guess Mike Jackson, because he pretty good boxer, pretty good kickboxer in the fights that he's had, which is more than we know about CM Punk's combat sports game. So I'd have to go Mike Jackson.
This card, top to bottom, in my opinion, is the deepest card of 2018. I don't think that's saying too much. The card in Brooklyn was a great card, but of course then it was ravaged by the incident at the Barclays Center on the Thursday before the fight. You've got Joseph Benavidez and Sergio Pettis happening on the Fight Pass prelims. Rashad Evans in a must-win situation against Anthony Smith. Claudio Gadelha against Carlos Esparza. Mirsad Bektik fighting on the card against Ricardo Lamas. Any other fight you want to highlight before we say goodbye?
It's really hard because I could probably, every one of those that you named, I could talk about for a good amount of time. But probably Carla Esparza and Claudia Gadelha, I think there's a great story there because these are two women who don't like each other, and they had not liked each other for a very long time. They should have fought twice before in Invicta. It's a 5-year kind of story there, and it's an important fight in that division. There's a new champion at strawweight, Rose Namajunas, and either one of those, there's kind of a good story there because Gadelha couldn't get over the Joanna, the Jędrzejczyk kind of hump a little bit, and Carla Esparza has a win over Rose Namajunas. So I think that fight is super intriguing to me to see where that division goes in the future, and also it kind of is a culmination of that long rivalry.
All right, so here's the deal. It is currently 7:30 p.m. Central Time. As of right this second, the main event is on. It's not the main event that we expected. It's not the same stakes. It's Romero versus Robert Whittaker in a non-title fight. But as of right this moment, it is on. We'll see what happens come tomorrow. We have, been programmed to expect the unexpected when it comes to all things Ultimate Fighting Championship. But that's where we stand at this moment. We'll be back here inside that building in around 24 hours to take in and report on one of the best fights and the deepest fight card of the year. I can't wait for that. It's UFC 225 from here in the Windy City. That is Marc Raimondi. I am Ariel Helwani. For the rest of our crew here in Chicago, thank you very much for watching our coverage up until this point. We'll be back on Saturday night for our usual fight night coverage, so keep it locked right here over at MMAfighting.com. We'll see you on Saturday night.